Source: Associated Press, January 16, 2026, U.S. Department of State official statement. Analysis references Immigration Policy Framework from American Immigration, a very short introduction by David Gerber, Oxford University Press, 2011, and Contemporary Sports Diplomacy Studies. Right now, at this very moment, a decision made in Washington, D.C. is reshaping the future of international sports in America. Before we dive deep into this breaking story, hit that subscribe button and smash the like icon because what you're about to discover will change how you see immigration policy forever. January 16th, 2026. The date that will be remembered as a turning point in American visa policy. The Associated Press broke the story just hours ago, and the implications are staggering. The United States government has announced an expansion of visa restrictions, but here's where it gets interesting. Buried within this policy shift is a clause that nobody saw coming. Major sporting events are now exempt. Let me repeat that because the weight of this statement cannot be understated. While thousands of visa applications face new scrutiny and stricter requirements, athletes competing in designated major sporting events will receive special treatment. The irony is almost poetic. At a time when borders are tightening, the doors swing wide open for those who can throw a ball, run faster, or jump higher than anyone else. The State Department's official statement, released early this morning, provides the framework. According to their documentation, the expanded restrictions target what they call security concerns and economic priorities. David Gerber's comprehensive analysis in American immigration reminds us that policy shifts like these rarely happen in isolation. They're symptoms of deeper currents running through the national consciousness. But pause for a moment and consider what this really means. An athlete from a country now facing heightened visa restrictions can still enter the United States if they're competing in the Super Bowl, the World Series, major tennis tournaments, or international soccer matches hosted on American soil. A scientist from the same country, a student, an entrepreneur? They face an entirely different reality. The disparity is not just notable, it's deliberate. Sources within the Department of Homeland Security, speaking to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity, revealed that this exemption was debated for weeks. The sporting industry lobby worked overtime. Billions of dollars hang in the balance. The economic impact of major sporting events on American cities cannot be ignored. Hotels, restaurants, transportation services, broadcasting rights, merchandise sales. The ecosystem is vast and interconnected. If you're finding this information valuable, show your support by hitting that like button right now. Your engagement helps us bring you more critical analysis like this. The timing of this announcement raises questions that demand answers. Why now? Why this particular configuration of restrictions and exemptions? The Associated Press report indicates that pressure from multiple directions converge simultaneously. National security advisors pushing for tighter controls. Sports franchises and event organizers threatening to move competitions to other countries. Cities that have invested millions in sports infrastructure lobbying to protect their investments. Consider the upcoming international fixtures already scheduled on American soil. Tennis championships, golf tournaments, Olympic qualifying events, international soccer friendlies, basketball exhibitions. Each one represents not just athletic competition but diplomatic opportunity. When athletes compete, nations watch. When nations watch, soft power flows. The concept of sports diplomacy isn't new, but its weaponization through immigration policy represents a fascinating evolution. By maintaining open doors for athletes while restricting others, America sends a clear message about what it values and where its priorities lie. Entertainment and economics triumph over other considerations. Let's examine the mechanics of how this will actually work. According to the State Department guidelines published today, sporting organizations must apply for event designation at least 90 days in advance. The criteria include international significance, economic impact projections, and security assessment clearances. Once an event receives designation, participating athletes automatically qualify for expedited visa processing regardless of their country of origin. The exemption extends beyond the athletes themselves. Coaches, trainers, team physicians, and essential support staff also qualify. But here's where the boundaries get tested. What about journalists covering these events? What about family members of the athletes? The guidelines remain deliberately vague on these points, suggesting that implementation will require significant interpretation and potentially case-by-case decisions. Immigration attorneys contacted by the Associated Press expressed concerns about the precedent this sets. If sporting events warrant exemptions, what about other forms of international exchange? Cultural festivals, academic conferences, medical symposiums? The slippery slope argument gains traction when policy creates tiers of worthiness. Take a breath and let that sink in. We're witnessing the creation of a two-tier system based on entertainment value and economic utility. The international reaction has been swift and divided. Countries benefiting from the sports exemption issued carefully worded statements praising American openness to international competition. Nations facing the brunt of expanded restrictions without significant sporting presence in America condemned what they called discriminatory practices disguised as policy. European Union officials, speaking to the Associated Press earlier today, indicated they're monitoring the situation closely. If American policy disproportionately affects EU citizens, reciprocal measures might follow. The diplomatic chess game begins before the policy even takes full effect. Asian sporting federations expressed relief that their athletes can continue competing in lucrative American markets. The financial stakes for individual athletes cannot be overstated. An Olympic qualifier held in the United States could make or break careers. Prize money from American tournaments often dwarfs what athletes can earn elsewhere. Access equals opportunity, and opportunity equals survival in professional sports. Before we continue with more shocking details, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss critical updates like this one. From an economic perspective, the numbers tell their own story. Major sporting events generate an estimated $18 billion annually for the American economy, according to industry analyses. The Super Bowl alone pumps roughly $500 million into its host city during event week. International tennis tournaments, golf championships, and soccer matches attract wealthy spectators who spend far beyond ticket prices. The sports tourism industry employs hundreds of thousands of Americans directly and indirectly. Hotels, restaurants, transportation companies, security firms, vendors, broadcasters. The ecosystem depends on international participation. Without foreign athletes competing at the highest levels, American audiences lose interest, television ratings decline, sponsorship money evaporates, and the entire economic model collapses. So the exemption isn't generosity. It's self-preservation. But here's what makes this situation truly complex. By creating this carve-out, American policymakers acknowledge something profound. They admit that strict adherence to security-focused restrictions would damage American interests. They concede that absolute policies are impossible when economic realities intervene. They reveal that every rule has a price tag where it can be bent. Critics argue this undermines the stated justification for expanded restrictions in the first place. If security concerns are legitimate enough to restrict visas broadly, how do those concerns magically disappear when an athlete needs to compete? Does a tennis player pose less security risk than an engineer? Does a soccer player undergo more rigorous vetting than a medical researcher? The logical inconsistencies are glaring, but policy has never been purely logical. Policy is negotiation. It's compromise between competing interests. It's the art of appearing strong while making strategic concessions. The sporting exemption is political theater dressed as practical necessity. Let's talk about the athletes themselves for a moment. Imagine training your entire life for a moment of glory. Imagine finally qualifying for a prestigious tournament in America, the land of opportunity where champions are made. Then imagine watching your country fall under expanded visa restrictions. The anxiety must be overwhelming. Will I be able to compete? Will years of sacrifice mean nothing because of diplomatic tensions I have no control over? Now imagine the relief when you learn about the exemption. Gratitude mixed with confusion. Why am I special? Why do I get passage when my sister the doctor cannot visit? survivor's guilt in visa form. The human element of this policy cannot be ignored, even as we analyze its structural implications. Real people navigate these bureaucratic mazes. Real dreams hang in balance. Real families separate or reunite based on governmental decisions made in distant offices by people who will never meet those affected. The Associated Press report includes several anonymous interviews with athletes from affected regions. One tennis player described the emotional roller coaster of the past few days. First despair upon hearing about expanded restrictions, then cautious hope when whispers of sporting exemptions began circulating. Finally, tentative relief upon official confirmation, tempered by guilt about preferential treatment. Right now, I want you to hit that like button if you're still with me, because we're about to dive into the most controversial aspect of this entire situation. The legal challenges are inevitable. Civil rights organizations are already preparing lawsuits arguing that the sporting exemption proves the discriminatory nature of the broader restrictions. If the government can identify major sporting events as sufficiently valuable to warrant exemptions, it demonstrates the restrictions aren't about security, but about selective enforcement based on economic and political calculations. Constitutional law experts cited by the Associated Press suggest these challenges face uphill battles. Courts have historically granted wide latitude to executive branch decisions on immigration and national security. But the blatant economic motivation behind the sporting exemption might provide an opening for legal arguments about arbitrary and capricious policymaking. The discovery process alone would be fascinating. Internal communications about how the sporting exemption was crafted, who lobbied for it, what economic analyses were conducted, which security concerns were deemed surmountable for athletes but insurmountable for others. Transparency could reveal uncomfortable truths about how American policy actually gets made. Meanwhile, sporting organizations celebrate their victory. The NBA, NFL, MLB, major tennis, and golf organizations all issued statements praising the decision. They frame it as recognition of sports' unifying power and economic importance. They don't mention the millions spent on lobbying efforts or the threats to relocate events overseas if access wasn't guaranteed. Power dynamics operate invisibly until moments like these expose them. The sporting industrial complex flexed its muscles and won. What does that tell us about American priorities? What does it reveal about who holds real influence over policy decisions? Universities and academic institutions watch with envy. International students face increasing barriers while athletes get red carpet treatment. Research collaborations suffer while sporting collaborations thrive. The message about what America values becomes impossible to ignore. Tech companies and startups that rely on international talent see the writing on the wall. If sporting organizations can secure exemptions through lobbying and economic arguments, perhaps other industries need to organize similar campaigns. The precedent has been set. Exemptions are purchasable through the right combination of money, influence, and economic impact projections. This is where policy becomes marketplace. Rights and access become commodities available to those with resources to acquire them. The implications extend far beyond immigration into fundamental questions about equality and justice in a capitalist democracy. Take a moment to breathe and process what we've uncovered here. The scope of this story goes beyond simple policy changes. Looking at historical parallels provides context. David Gerber's work on American immigration patterns reveals cyclical tightening and loosening based on economic conditions and political climates. What's unique about the current moment is the surgical precision of exemptions. Previous eras saw blanket restrictions or wholesale openings. This new approach picks winners and losers with unprecedented specificity. The sporting exemption is likely just the beginning. If it succeeds without major political backlash, expect other industries to demand similar treatment. Entertainment industry for major film productions and award ceremonies. Technology sector for critical conferences and product launches. Finance industry for international investment summits. Each claiming indispensable economic value deserving special consideration. We could be witnessing the birth of an entirely new immigration paradigm. Not based on traditional categories like family reunification, employment sponsorship, or humanitarian protection, but rather on transactional calculations of immediate economic benefit and political utility. The Associated Press reporting includes reactions from immigration advocacy organizations who see this as a dangerous precedent. By explicitly tying visa access to economic productivity and entertainment value, the policy reduces human beings to their monetary worth. It calculates whether someone deserves entry based on their ability to generate revenue or attract audiences. This philosophical shift has profound implications for American identity and values. The Statue of Liberty's famous inscription about welcoming tired, poor, huddled masses gives way to a more honest assessment. Welcome if you're profitable. Welcome if you entertain us. Welcome if you serve our interests. Everyone else, wait in line or stay away. If this content is opening your eyes to realities you hadn't considered, show your support with a like and make sure you're subscribed for future investigations. The implementation timeline adds another layer of complexity. The expanded restrictions take effect in 30 days. The sporting exemption process becomes operational in 45 days. That 15-day gap creates chaos for events scheduled during that window. The State Department promises case-by-case reviews, but that's bureaucratic speak for uncertainty and arbitrary decisions. Athletes with competitions scheduled in that transition period face impossible choices. Risk traveling without clear guidance? Withdraw from potentially career-defining events? The stress extends to event organizers who've sold tickets, secured sponsors, and made commitments they might not be able to fulfill. Major League Soccer expressed concerns about international friendlies planned for late February. Tennis officials worry about tournaments in early March. Olympic qualifying events face potential disruption. The Associated Press confirmed that emergency meetings are happening across sporting organizations trying to navigate the transition. Behind the scenes, the State Department is overwhelmed, processing designation applications from sporting organizations, while implementing broader restriction protocols while handling regular visa operations stretches resources thin. Reports suggest consular offices worldwide are bracing for confusion and confrontation. Some countries are already advising their athletes to arrive early for American competitions, entering on current visas before restrictions tighten. This creates its own problems as athletes sit idle in the United States for weeks, burning through savings, separated from training facilities and support systems. The ripple effects touch every aspect of international sporting competition. Tournament seeding might change if athletes cannot attend. Team compositions could shift last minute. Event quality suffers when the best competitors in the world face attendance uncertainty. Fans who purchased expensive tickets and travel packages to see specific athletes might find themselves disappointed. Insurance companies are rapidly drafting new policies to cover event cancellations or disruptions caused by visa issues. Lawyers are reviewing contracts to determine liability when international athletes cannot fulfill commitments due to policy changes. An entire ecosystem scrambles to adapt to new realities. Let's zoom out and consider the global sporting calendar. The United States hosts some of the world's most prestigious events across every major sport. Tennis Grand Slams on American soil, golf majors and tour events, international soccer friendlies and championship matches. Basketball and hockey with significant international player populations. Track and field competitions, auto racing, the list goes on. Each of these events now operates under the shadow of visa uncertainty unless they secure official designation. Smaller tournaments and competitions might not qualify. Up-and-coming athletes who aren't yet attached to major events face the full force of restrictions. The sporting exemption helps the elite but potentially harms those still climbing the ladder. Youth sports and amateur competitions fall into gray areas. Olympic development programs bringing international teenagers to America for training face unclear futures. Junior tournaments that launch professional careers might lose international participants. The long-term impact on sports development could be significant even if major professional events continue uninterrupted. Before we reach the conclusion of this analysis, I want to remind you one final time to hit that subscribe button and like this video. Share it with anyone who needs to understand these critical developments. The Associated Press continues to update its coverage as more details emerge. State Department officials promise additional guidance documents in coming days. Sporting organizations await clarity on specific designation criteria. Athletes around the world watch nervously as their careers hang in political balance. What happens next depends on factors beyond any single person's control. Will the policy face legal challenges that alter its implementation? Will international pressure force modifications? Will other countries retaliate with reciprocal restrictions affecting American athletes? Will public opinion shift as individual stories of affected athletes gain attention? The sporting exemption reveals so much about contemporary America. Our priorities, our values, our willingness to compromise stated principles when money is involved. It shows how policy gets made through lobbying, pressure, and negotiation rather than consistent application of stated ideals. It exposes the gap between rhetoric and reality in immigration discussions. But it also demonstrates pragmatism and adaptability. Recognizing that absolute restrictions serve no one's interests shows flexibility. Acknowledging economic realities reflects mature policymaking. Creating space for international sporting competition maintains American relevance on the global stage. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between competing narratives. This isn't purely cynical favoritism toward profitable entertainment, but neither is it principled policy consistently applied. It's messy, complicated, human decision-making trying to balance multiple valid concerns within impossible constraints. Athletes who benefit from the exemption didn't create this system. Sporting organizations lobbying for access aren't villains for protecting their interests. Government officials crafting policy face genuine security concerns alongside economic pressures. Everyone involved operates within structures larger than themselves. What we can control is how we respond. Staying informed through reliable sources like the Associated Press, thinking critically about policy, implications beyond surface-level reactions, engaging in civic processes that shape these decisions, supporting organizations that advocate for values we hold dear, demanding transparency and consistency from our leaders. The expansion of visa restrictions with sporting exemptions will affect lives in ways we cannot yet fully comprehend. Athletes will compete or withdraw, events will proceed or collapse, economies will benefit or suffer. Relationships between nations will strengthen or fray, all because of decisions made in government offices by people responding to pressures we rarely see. This is your moment to take action. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this policy. Do sporting exemptions make sense or expose hypocrisy? Should economic considerations override security concerns? How would you balance these competing interests? Your perspective matters and contributes to crucial conversations about America's role in the world. Subscribe to this channel to stay updated as this story develops. More revelations will emerge. More implications will become clear. More voices will join the debate. You need to be part of this conversation because decisions made today shape the world we all inhabit tomorrow. Hit that like button to help this video reach more people who need to see it. Understanding policy helps us become better citizens and more informed participants in democracy. Knowledge is power, but only if we use it to engage rather than passively observe. The story of expanded visa restrictions with sporting exemptions is really a story about us, about what we prioritize, what we're willing to compromise, what we demand from our leaders, and what we accept without question. It's a mirror reflecting our collective values whether we like what we see or not. January 16th, 2026 might be remembered as the day American immigration policy fully embraced transactional logic over consistent principle. Or it might be a footnote in a longer story we're still writing together. That outcome depends on us. Thank you for watching this deep investigation into breaking news that affects us all. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay critical. The world needs people who think deeply about these issues rather than accepting simple narratives. Be that person. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.